Welcome to part 36 of the Basic Training Booster Pass Edition. Today we're going to cover everything you need to know to play Squeaky Clean Sprint on 150cc. The recommended build for this course is going to be Daisy, Streetle, Rollers, and Paper Glider. Streetle is being used here because its increased water speed and traction allow us to more easily navigate the vast amount of underwater and slippery surfaces that are on the track. Now, I'm going to warn you that if you're trying to put up a good time, this is hands down one of the most difficult courses in the game. But unfortunately, for reasons we'll get into later, you're not actually going to be able to implement most of what you need to learn to do so. What you're watching play out on screen right now is what I typically refer to as the quote-unquote level 1 strats, and they basically consist of just tricking off of everything you possibly can while grabbing as many coins as you can. Here are the non-intuitive bits for the level 1 run. First, when going into the drain, build up a super mini turbo and then drift off of this hill here to take a tight line while building up a mini turbo. Then, trick off the final ramp when coming out of the drain. Second, you want to use your first mushroom to cut through the soapy off-road, but you see this fan up here? It pushes you away from the cut, so in order to do this strategy even reasonably fast, you need to bonk the wall and then release your super mini turbo as soon as possible. You'll be tempted to build up an ultra mini turbo, but just trust me on this. I spent literal hours on this track before realizing that all you have to do is just release your super mini turbo quickly to save time. Third, use your second mushroom to cut the off-road on the bottom path. Fourth, use your final mushroom on lap 2, and make sure to trick off the water jet that's coming out of the toilet to more easily get to the top path, tricking off the angled bit when you get up there. Finally, when going into lap 3, trick off the top of the sink and then land on the back surface of the sink. If you do all this, you should pretty easily be able to beat the staff ghost with multiple seconds to spare. Now, let's move on to the actual meat of the video, and like I said, fair warning, this entire course is a gigantic nightmare from start to finish. Don't believe me? Here's just some of the clips of me trying to learn the track from when I streamed my attempts last week. This course sucks, dude. This course is such a nightmare to time trial. That's so stupid, dude. Why? Why is this happening? God damn it, dude. So let's start from the beginning. At the start of the run, you want to jump in such a way that your front tires hit the front of the sink so that you can trick off the drain instead of the lip of the sink. On lap 1, it's not so bad, but on lap 2, you're going to have coins, which means you'll have to adjust your timing slightly to avoid getting a ton of airtime and then missing the trick entirely. The sponge section is entirely different and requires us to soft drift around the preceding turn to build up a super mini turbo and then right hop into right drift off the ramp. Holding the drift button and right in midair will allow us to build a super mini turbo by the time we land on the first sponge, at which point we want to release and then land in a left drift to grab the leftmost coin on the second sponge. Now, I could say this about literally everything in my personal best, but the timing and precision on this is absolutely ridiculous. You have almost no time to build up that super mini turbo, and if you miss it, you'll fly clean over the ramp. And even if you get the drift off the ramp, sometimes you might just randomly not get enough airtime to make it all the way to the water, in which case your line is going to get messed up and you won't be able to get the coin at the end of the last sponge. In either case, we're going to hold that last left drift all the way into the drain to charge an ultra mini turbo, and then we're on to the next bit of hell this course has to offer. Start another wide left drift so that you can grab the 2 coins moving up the drain here, and do a right hop into a right drift off the ramp. Build up a super mini turbo and then finish up the drain section with 2 left hops into another right drift off the ramp while grabbing one of the coins. Now, it probably goes without saying, but there are just so many things that can go wrong here. Ideally, you want to have 6 coins by the time you exit the drain, but it's very difficult to make this happen, specifically because of the fact that we need to build up an ultra mini turbo going into our first actual drift of the drain section. Your soft drift needs to be immaculate in order to make this happen, so if it's not, then just super mini turbo instead. The other thing about this section is the final drift off the ramp at the end. We don't want to trick here because it gives us a ton of airtime, but we also can't just do a right drift directly because otherwise our alignment's going to be all kinds of when we come out of the pipe. Hence the need for the additional left hop. The problem is that, yet again, the timing on this is super precise, and any delay means you're going to jump clean over the ramp. But this means that you already need to be in a perfect position to grab the coin before starting the 2 left hops. And speaking of coins, you need to be on a good pace already to grab those 2 coins before the hill. So all that is to say, if you're missing coins here, just deal with it and move on, because you have way bigger time loss potential on laps 2 and 3. Now, like we covered in the level 1 strats, after the glider, start a left drift and then use your second mushroom through the off-road here while charging up an Ultra Mini Turbo. But after releasing, you want to delay for just a fraction of a second before starting your next right drift, because this will give you some time to take the turn a little bit more tightly. After that, we are finally on to lap 2. It mostly plays the same as lap 1 for the first half. However, in order to get all the tricks, you need to release the accelerator at the top of the towel for, again, just a fraction of a second to make sure you don't overshoot the trick off the bottom portion of the towel. It's not 100% necessary, but it's a much safer way to make this happen. Once we get into the drain section, we're actually going to take the shortcut inside of it without a mushroom. It's honestly a lot less painful than it looks. After getting your Ultra Mini Turbo, start a left drift and then approach the left side of this little ramp here. Once you go off of it, move your joystick in an up left position, like a 10 o'clock if you think of your joystick like a clock face. This will help you take the turn tightly while forcing you to land on the off-road just in front of this little doodad here. When you hit it, it'll give you enough airtime to hopefully clear the rest of the off-road while also allowing you to charge an Ultra Mini Turbo. It's not the most consistent thing in the world, but you should be able to get it at least 75% of the time with just a bit of practice. The mushroom shortcut's taken just like we said before, but we are going to want to do a left drift to do the glider vectoring here, since this puts us in a better line to trick off the toilet fountain. When you land after the glider, if you just clip the edge of the ramp and land flat, you can get a super low trick here, which saves a ton of time. But if you're even slightly off, you'll get a really high trick instead. Landing a bit further back on the ramp like I do is a much safer way to get a decently low trick off of this ramp. We're going to finish up lap 2 with an Ultra Mini Turbo into more glider vectoring, and then once we start lap 3, we want to trick off this sink and immediately hold a hard up on the joystick to get back to the track as quickly as possible, because this will help us make sure the glider goes away quickly. I messed it up here, which is pretty unfortunate given that I was on a really good pace, but it's honestly very hard to time this out properly. The rest of lap 3 plays pretty much the same as lap 2, except that once we come out of the drain, we have no more mushrooms. So what we want to do is instead build up a Super Mini Turbo when coming out of the drain, which is another mistake I made here, and then follow it up with another Super Mini Turbo, again releasing as soon as possible to avoid the knockback effect of the fan. Now before checking out the full run, let's talk about the world record a bit. The start of lap 1 plays totally differently than what I do. They forego the trick at the start in favor of building up a Super Mini Turbo, which allows them to grab an additional coin while saving about a tenth of a second or so. The wacky sync shenanigans carry on into lap 2, where they again build up a Super Mini Turbo instead of tricking. If you're wondering why I don't go for those strategies in my own run, well, just rewind a couple minutes back or so when I talked about how precise all of this nonsense is. The only other major difference in strategy is on lap 3, where they do a low trick off the back edge of the sink, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record here, but I tried learning this and it seemed to be very precise, because not only do you need to actually be in the correct position to even get the trick in the first place, but you also need to delay the trick as much as possible to make sure that your glider goes away. Otherwise it can cost you a ton of time. Now, that's finally it for the strategies. Let's talk about the track a bit more while checking out my current personal best. This track was incredibly difficult to learn, so, you know, algorithm bait is always appreciated, so make sure to drop a like on this video to help me out if you can. Now, squeaky clean sprint. Let's just get the major negatives out of the way first. Whoever decided to put that fan on the mushroom cut seriously needs to not be allowed to ever design any aspect of any track ever again. Alright, now that I got that off my chest, let's talk about the roller coaster of emotions that I went through to learn this course. When I first played it on release, I thought it was one of the best tour courses we've gotten so far. Then, I spent a bunch of time on stream a couple weeks ago trying to learn all the strats, and I began to progressively hate the track more and more. I mean, the sync trick just really sucks, especially on lap 2, where the timing is different due to the fact that you have more coins. Then, you immediately have to soft drift into a double hop drift off the ramp to get yet another Super Mini Turbo. Then you have to soft drift with the timing of the gods to navigate the drain section properly, and after all that, you've got that stupid fan to deal with. Ultimately I decided, you know what, screw this track. I thought to myself I'd just get a mid 208 and leave it alone, but then something funny happened. I figured, you know, maybe I'm doing something wrong here, and I watched the world record again and began to notice little inefficiencies with how I was approaching some of the seemingly more random and janky bits of the track. And I also got some advice from people on my stream who already had some pretty good times. While it did still take me another hour and a half from that point to go from a high 208 to a mid 208, I was consistently getting more and more runs into lap 3, and I started to realize, you know, maybe I'm the problem. The next day I pushed my 208 down to a 207, and then down to a 206. And finally, a few days later, I got the run you're watching now. Though I do have to admit that it took me another 5 to 6 hours of grinding in total to pull that all off. I guess the point of all this is that the course is definitely one of the hardest in the game. But despite the fact that it's just a rising crescendo of precise drifts and trick timings, at the end of the day, it is at least somewhat consistent, and now that I've finally figured that out, I do think it's actually quite a fun track to play, and I will still say that it's one of my favorites in the wave. And that's everything you need to know to play Squeaky Clean Sprint on 150cc. Hopefully this video helped you all out, and if so, let me know how much you were able to improve down in the comments, because I'd really like to know that I'm not the only one having had to go through the pain of actually taking this course seriously for a while. Thank you all very much for taking the time out of your day to do some basic training, and as always, I will see you in the next video.